Welcome to the Education Blueprint. I'm Dr. Jon Rysewyk, Superintendent of Knox County Schools in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And I'm Prentice Elliott, a public school parent and your producer and co-host.
Prentice, today we're talking about education and mainstream media, and we can't do that without also talking about just communication.
Yeah, when you talk about communication with the schools, John, I know we're similar ages, and when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid, if you heard from the school, if the school called your house or you got any kind of communication, it was bad news.
Yeah, that's true. When we were in school, right, back in the 80s and 90s, I think you had kind of no news was good news is what our parents thought, right? Yeah, I think the expectations definitely changed about communication.
I've got 5 kids, and I don't even necessarily have to check their backpacks because the teachers are sending, messages over the phone. I can text their teachers in class. It's a completely different world. I mean, we're getting messages like, it's cold today. Make sure your kids are wearing coats, that kind of thing. And it's not just your kid was talking in class. It's they did this great thing or these opportunities are coming up for them. So it's a really kind of almost a proactive approach now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we see from the volume of messages we're sending out, I think over 2 million of those last year when we started looking back at our parent square.
I got about 1 million of them.
Yeah. So you probably did, which is amazing. I mean, those can come from an individual school. They can come from the full district, as you know. That's the system we use to get that done. And I think it's interesting because, schools are kind of a microcosm of society, right? And so what we're seeing there in that increase in communication has almost become an expectation. So there's all these kinds of things. We're constantly bombarded with this, and schools aren't exempt for that either.
Yeah, absolutely. Media has changed quite a bit over the years, obviously just in our lifetimes. Within schools, even morning announcements have evolved, many doing student-led video broadcasts across all grade levels. Let's take a listen to a few of these.
Come on, come all to the greatest school of all. Good morning, Cougars, and welcome to our morning news. Let's start each morning with our school motto. I will work hard today because hard work pays off.
It is Xavier Dobson Day in Knoxville. Here are your Fulton announcements. I'm Tariq.
And I'm Maddox.
Good morning, Carnes High School. Welcome to the Daily Beaver Breakdown. I'm Noah.
And I'm Taylor.
And so that's what students are doing. Luckily today, when we talk about media, we have someone who is an expert on the subject, so it's not just you and I talking about this.
That's right. In fact, today we have a guest that's a true communicator, a multimedia guy, a highly trusted voice and leader in our community, a top-rated radio show host, Tennessee Radio and Tennessee Business Hall of Famer, an incredible motivational speaker, and a leadership and personal development coach. Hallerin Hilton Hill, thank you for being with us today.
Honored to be here. Excited to be here today.
We kind of go way back. Probably 15, 16 years ago, we were at Fulton High School.
We were.
And I remember you came and broadcasted live from there. You were so great to help us tell our story. And in between commercial breaks, I believe we did some push-ups together.
We did. That was then.
That's right. That's right. Maybe not as many push-ups now, more conversation. But yeah, I just really appreciated, we were doing something pretty radical at that school. Everything from uniforms to breaking schools into smaller places where kids could be seen and weren't falling through cracks. And, that ended up being a huge success over time, thanks to a lot of people. And, you came in early and realized that maybe we were doing something there that would make a difference. And, that really helped us get some of that message out to our families.
My mother was a teacher. I recognized when you were at Fulton that all of the things you were doing were not just changes. When you and your team made the assessment of where those children were, believing in their possibilities, if we make these pivots, they are going to get the better outcomes. It's not just going to be, we're going to run the numbers up on the scorecard. The ultimate win for the school system or for any community is the quality of life of the person that benefited from the structures we designed to help them get there.
Well, you mentioned someone who I know has been a big influence on your life. Your mom was that for you. Maybe tell us a little bit about just what the impact she had on you.
The people that my mother most admired were the Sunday school teachers at her church and her teachers at school. And my grandmother Hattie was emphatic that they get some type of education to lift them out and maybe point them toward opportunity. And so she saw education as a gateway, but these educators in that community, when she was a little girl, both at Sunday school and at school proper, made her feel special, made her feel some potential to be something, to do something. And the experience that those teachers gave her, she wanted to give to other students. And there weren't many pathways to be a dignified, respected person in the community. Teachers were amongst the most respected, connected to a higher purpose. And so she went on that pathway.
Wow.
And she changed my life and all that would come after her.
Well, I can see that. Education is extremely important to you. We have a lot of creative kids in Knox County. You know, some have gone to great fame doing music and things like that, and some, you know, play in the band or maybe play in the Knoxville Symphony Orchestra or have artwork that hangs on our local things. People know you as this trusted voice and the what we listen to on our way home or sometimes in the morning, depending on where you are in your programming. You have this creative side. You know, you're a songwriter, you're a musician, and I'll just go out and say, I don't have this gene. And this is why I marvel at people who do. People who can create something that's never been, that there's something inside of them that they express through song or through a painting or through a poem that just comes out and it's never existed. So what is that process like?
I don't know that I buy that there are certain people who are creative and certain people who are not. My mother sang, you know, I was around music a lot. And so it started there. And then I started to realize it brought me so much joy. I write music every day, 365 days, of the year.
If anyone could get it in 370, you would.
I enjoy going to the blank page or the blank space. Now my habit is I sit down in front of the keyboard, and at some point today, this will happen for me. I let my hand fall on the keyboard, and I literally will hear 2 or 3 notes, and I'll look up at God and go, oh, that's what we're doing today? Okay. Creativity is availability. And creativity is this ability to be so present in any given moment that you take and embrace what the moment has for you right now.
I mean, it's so important for anyone listening, but our students to hear that too, that you've got to find that thing that gives you energy. But there's a risk factor too that I'm hearing. When you create something through music or maybe through art, it's very personal. And then in lots of cases, you're putting this out to the world to judge something that's very personal. Whether you're recognized with a Grammy or whether you're not, it's okay to get that out is what I hear you saying with that energy. But maybe to speak a little bit to that.
When you have a high skill set, you understand your tools, the technology you're using, you understand the theory of what you're doing, then that gap of time between you hearing an idea in your head and it actually expressing itself closes, which means the rate and the pace of creativity goes up. But also your ability and availability to serve starts to go up. I get a call from a friend. He says, I'm working on a movie with Whitney Houston. We've got 6 hours to come up with a song to fit this scene in the movie. I'd already started, was pretty much halfway through the song. By midnight, they're in the studio. By 9 o'clock, they're in the office at Disney. By 10, everybody's crying. You know, by Christmas, I got some money. But all those years of writing every day made me available. So it's great when you get the awards and the accolades, but the best part of creativity is the expression itself. It's the moment you're sitting there, you feel an inspiration, or you make yourself available to an inspiration, and you feel that spark of divinity that drives all creativity. There's nothing greater than that. The awards, the accolades, the people responding to your work, it feels great. But if you ever learn to enjoy the pure joy of just, oh man, it was beautiful to be in that moment.
That's good for kids thinking about those things too. You know, what your teacher's asking you to do every day. You know, sometimes may feel monotonous, but it is that preparation for that opportunity when it comes that you're ready. And I think that's really important because we haven't always been in the roles. So I think it's neat for our kids to hear from successful people what their journey was. What was your journey to get to here in Knoxville?
My story is a story about how a community might surround someone that they see potential in. I got to Knoxville about 35 years ago. I'd had some success in radio as a young guy. I thought I would spend the bulk of my career in management. So I get a gig in the Virgin Islands, a dream job, and Hurricane Hugo hits. And I show up in Knoxville, lived on Brandow Street near Knoxville College, and I had $300. I took $200 and bought a suit. Probably the thing that I had more than anything was optimism. That was the secret sauce, believing that something was possible. And the only thing I could think to do was print up some resumes. So I got the phone book. Who are the top TV stations? Who are the top radio stations? Who are the top advertising agencies? Who are the top places that have communications departments, et cetera? And I end up riding the bus to what was then Dick Broadcasting, which is now Cumulus. Cold off the street, walk in, ask to see the manager. They hired me on a 90-day probation through the holidays at $6.80 an hour, I think it was. And it's 35 years later. I guess I've been there longer than anyone in the company now. I started a talk show. I'm a reporter.
I hear from you opportunity and preparedness, and a little divine intervention in people who
Work ethic.
spoke in. Work ethic is
To the young people that
important.
might watch this, work ethic. There are no wasted reps.
I love that.
Can the best version of you show up on your worst day? And when you're putting your reps in during difficult situations, you're developing this ability to have the best of you show up on your worst days. And if you have the kind of character where the best of you shows up on your worst days, you have no idea what's going to happen on your best days.
I might have had that conversation with my two college daughters before when they're in the end and saying, "But Dad, this course," or "But Dad, this professor," and I said, "No, this is your time to show." A degree tells future employers that they know. They all went through school too. They all know there was that professor, there was that course you struggled through. They all did too. They want to know, did you get it done? Could you at the end did you complete the task? And that's who they're looking to hire. And I think that the work ethic is extremely important. I could talk to you all day about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really some great advice about flexibility, availability, persistence. After the break, though, I think we're going to really get into the media of it all. Stay with us. Coming up on the Education Blueprint.
And so now the challenge is, how do you become top of mind so that you become the preferred or reliable source? And so that's the matrix we're in now.
And later,
We try to communicate more because I want to bring more people into the fold. Even if they disagree, I want them to understand what our thinking is. You're listening to the Education Blueprint. I'm Dr. Jon Rysewyk, Superintendent for Knox County Schools. And we're here today with Hallerin Hilton Hill talking about education and multimedia. I'm going to jump right in. Hal, you're a pillar in Knoxville talk radio, and you've been working for nearly, I think you said 35 years in this area. A lot has changed in 35 years. Maybe just outline some of that for us.
Yeah, so we are literally in the golden age of communication. There's never been a greater age of communication with audio and video and text in the history of the world. If we look at the progression, radio was the earliest of technologies. Radio turned into television, film, all that stuff. But there was a limited bandwidth. You had 3 major networks. As America suburbanized and people got cars, and then you had traffic, and cars had this technology of radio, and people could listen on the go. But everything that was happening in radio and television was linear, and you had to listen in real time. So as the market started to develop, then we start to have newer technologies. We start to move to cable, where you have multiple networks, right? And then we start to move it off of towers and this over-the-air transmission, and we start to move it through fiber. We have the emergence of the internet. We have Wi-Fi, and we have 5G, and now signals can move to these supercomputers in our pocket, and everything starts to shift. So boom, here come podcasts, audio books, here comes YouTube, here come all the social media platforms. We're doing the same thing, but the gateways, the platforms have multiplied 100-fold. You give people 100 options, they still can only consume 1 or 2. And so now the challenge is, how do you become top of mind so that you become the preferred or reliable source? And so that's the matrix we're in now.
I can remember my grandfather, going out to get the newspaper every day, and that was kind of the news. He'd thumb through it, and that's kind of what everyone talked about in that cycle. I read the other day, Walter Cronkite, he was kind of the trusted, you're hearing it from him, and so that's it. Like, that's the truth, that's the gospel, and society kind of worked off of that. And you talk about, so not just one source. So what impact have you seen that have on people that now I can maybe even kind of tailor where I get my news or the slant on the news.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things have happened. Those of us in traditional media, really, we are bearing witness to a tectonic shift. So you take, for instance, you mentioned Walter Cronkite.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Walter Cronkite of this generation is Joe Rogan. So he has more viewers, listeners, than all of the cable networks combined. If you just look at the raw data. But then so does Ryan Hall, y'all. Ryan is a weather guy, and he started doing school closings as a 14-year-old on YouTube from his home in Pikeville, Kentucky. And at any given time, he's got 1 million people watching him talk about weather.
1 million people.
And during the snow stuff, he had more people watching him than were watching the Weather Channel. Now, this is how radically, that's the shift. So what I've seen in media, though, in answer to your question is, because we're so niched now, you can find something tailored to your preference and just stay there. So if you're liberal, you can find sources that cater to that, or if you're conservative. The force multiplier of that, though, is that the algorithms of social media tap into your preferences and figure out a way to serve you only that. So on the one hand, we've never had more access, but we haven't seen this kind of narrowing, because once people get in a silo, it's hard to get them out for so many psychological reasons. And that's a hard thing when you're trying to communicate an idea. And so it really makes it difficult and complex.
I think, part of unraveling some of that is just this is the new reality. Our interaction is a lot more kind of 24/7, and used to be maybe we get a story for the day, and now we might get 3 in a day, depending on what's posted on social media and those kinds of things. So you're in the middle of this, a guy that, again, I know personally with a lot of integrity, but numbers and advertisers and things drive media, and it's the reality. So how does media keep some version of a standard? Because, again, it's real easy to chase the dollar, but still people need honest media. So what does that look like being a media person in this world?
It's been a really challenging journey for me because I'm an independent. I hope truth wins out. In the middle of all of this, how do you hold a standard? I think it's the right thing to do to tell the truth, to be accurate, to be consistent, to have a goodwill toward people, even if they disagree with you. I think those virtues of communication over time will pay off. I think as we go forward and we start to see the full effects of AI, I think people will begin to be more cautious because they'll see the grand manipulation and they will start to crave something that's real and true and honest. At least that's my hope.
I think our world is hungry for authenticity. There's something about that, it doesn't always have to be clean. It just has to be authentic. It just has to be real. And I think
Right.
you're right. And sometimes in kind of overproduced society, like those real stories like this young man you're talking about who does the weather, people are going, well, he's real. He doesn't have an angle. He's just going to tell truth. I saw a quote the other day. I think it was a St. Augustine quote that said, you don't have to defend the truth. Set it free and it'll defend itself. And,
Yeah, I love that.
I'm where you are too. There is hope in that.
I think storytelling is essential. Being able to tell a great story. You probably have to tell it quicker. But I think over the long arc, I believe if you know your why, if you think about your customer, being clear on who you're serving and why you're serving them, and this is going to seem so hokey, but here goes. Can I connect what I'm doing to a higher purpose? And I think when organizations kind of keep bringing themselves back to the why and wanting to have integrity for the sake of the end user, I think it shines. Platform agnostic, I think it shines.
You talked about the authenticity and that kind of being a currency now in media. And I think that ties back into some of the philosophies, things that KCS is doing. And I think we could talk about why that came about and where that change happened on the other side of this break. But for right now, you're listening to The Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk. Still to come on The Education Blueprint.
And sometimes I sit in meetings that we go, this is important work, and it's not happening at the ground. And I'm going, well, it's not as important as we thought it was, because the people on the ground are saying it's getting in the way of the important work. So it's important for us to pulse our system.
And later,
I think the through line is Can we depend on you to tell us the truth and to give us the information we need so that parents can make the best decision for their kids?
Welcome back to the Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk. And Jon, we heard from Hallerin about communication and some of the different ways that's evolved over time. It's certainly evolved in Knox County schools. And I guess my question to you with Hallerin sitting here is, how has that changed and why?
That's a good question, Prentice. I think we've shifted considerably in the last 3 years. And really, for me, it comes down to we're a large organization in the community. We're one of the largest. For a long time, we've kind of kept our head down. For the most part, we've not told our story. And it's important because we take our mission very serious. We're the only organization that wakes up every day thinking about preparing the next generation of Knoxville. And I've said this, we can't do this alone. Like, we'll take care of the reading, we'll take care of the science, the math, all the we have experts loaded in every school for that. But there's so much more that comes into preparing the next generation that we can't do. And I think for a long time, as an organization, we've kind of shut our doors and said, no, we got that, we got that. I wanted us to take a different approach. And I think that involves a couple of things. I wanted us to be transparent. And sometimes that comes down to data and things like that. But sometimes that comes down to answering when the media calls and wants to do an interview or wants to have a conversation. Us getting in real time, not be over polished, right? Be who we are, be honest. I think accountable too. I want to own when we're not where we should be. And also celebrate when we've exceeded where we said we would be. I think that's important. There's so many good things that are going on, and it's not propaganda. It's a chance for us to be able to promote our kids, promote our educators, and the work that they're doing, because that work is so essential. The impact of us not doing our job well as an organization is an unhealthy community for the future, and we all have a role to play in that. And so we try to communicate more because I want to bring more people into the fold. Even if they disagree, I want them to understand what our thinking is. If we're not willing to be available and we're not willing to be out there in the front doing these things and inviting people in multiple ways, we can become very siloed.
And maybe Hallerin can speak to this as well. That authenticity that you guys were talking about, if you're going to communicate more, if it's all good news, then people start to tune it out a little bit. You know, if you're not honest when things don't work, or you need to look somewhere else, or you're not listening to new ideas. So I think that's been a real key, is just that honesty.
It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I dropped the ball. It's okay to say, we missed. It's okay to say that. And I think we went through a period where cancel culture was real. I think cancel culture is starting to get canceled because over time, people realize that people are human and they mess up and they make errors and they, and I think when you're inauthentic, the audience has the reaction of, you think I'm too dumb to realize that you just didn't get that right. And then, like I said, whatever doubt emerges, it's going to be, I don't trust you anymore. I know this for sure. Wise people love truth. And they won't hold truth against you. And so I think if you defer to that.
That's what we have tried to do as an organization in the last 3 years. We're still going to celebrate our 18 reward schools and have a press conference, talk about that when that happens. But also when we were having a lot of threats, getting multiple calls from the media, and we said, let's go, press conference on the plaza. And we went down, and we didn't have any prepared speeches.
From the media, from my side of it, watching the way you guys have managed crises has made me more confident in you and your team's leadership than your successes. I've seen it happen a couple of times, and it really actually enhanced the organization. Like, we'll reach out and say, can we talk to the superintendent about what's going on? And you just show up.
Well, I appreciate that. I think education is unique because probably one of the few common experiences all Americans have.
Right. And
they come kind of with certain feelings about that. So I think we're unique some in how we interface with the media because of that.
I think you guys have a multifaceted challenge when it comes to communication. So first of all, from the parent perspective, what's their focus, their locus point is their child. They're not thinking system-wide, 95 schools, 91
right?
schools. They're not thinking 60,000 students. They're thinking their child or their child's friend group. That's about it. You got this wide-angle lens. How do I communicate to that parent that we're on your team and we're going to help them get to where they're going. Then you have the child, their vantage point, what's being communicated to them. You know, we have two realities, right? We have what we experience and what we believe we experienced. So you've got to deal with that gap there. Got the public perception, but then you guys have an even bigger communications challenge. But how you communicate to the team and the people internally, that in and of itself and between the pieces of this organization is as important to everything that goes out. Because here's what happens. You communicated a front-facing idea to me, but if they run into one of your assistant principals, and if you guys aren't communicating the same, not only information, but energy. Like one thing I teach people about communication is that communication is energy, and we're communicating all the time. Words sometimes come into play. The way you walk in a room, the way you greet someone or don't, the way you are present with someone, the quality and depth of your listening. You're communicating all the time. And that to me is authenticity. I'm not quite sure how that is executed, but that's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, we talk about parents as a customer. We talk about students as a customer. We'll get into a third one, the stakeholders. So there's a whole thing to say. We're a value add to the community, and your return on investment is worth it. That's what we need to speak to those folks. But you do, when you talk about the internal feedback a board member gave me in my first year in evaluation, we had our one-on-one meeting, was he said, more people want to hear from you. What I heard was whatever it was I was communicating wasn't getting throughout the organization all the way down to the classroom. And we say this all the time to our principals when we talk to them. The school system is not Knox County schools. Everyone's experience of Knox County schools is the car line, is your teacher responding back to an email, is those sorts of things. So it's not the head speaking words or wisdom or quoting 4 priorities, which is important, but we've got to make it trickle through the whole system so everyone has the enthusiasm, has the message, knows the why, all the way down to the beginning. Now, it's a work in progress, but that is, I agree with you 100%.
How you strategically use your time and energy to communicate is figuring out strategically how to make that happen.
So I've always, my first year I hit 70-some schools, and that was pretty much what I did the whole time. Now we're hitting about half each year for actual visits, not just I was there for a photo op or something, but actually walking with that school leader.
That's so awesome.
Going to classroom, show me your best work.
What's the response you've gotten from that?
It's been amazing. Now, what I added this year was I realized I need to go a layer deeper. So when I meet with principals now, my secretary will send out, if you have 4 or 5 teachers on plan, he'd like 15 minutes. And now I get the people who are doing the work sitting in a room, and I can ask them one question, like how it may be something, tell me the best strategy you're using for our special education students right now. And it gives me a chance to pulse the system and go, well, oh, that's awesome. Where did you hear about that? Because I want to know, I'm checking back to go, is my team simplifying the message? That's something they picked up and now they're executing? Is it something they figured out on their own in an innovative way? Because if so, I want to replicate that and get it back to my team. I still go to each region and spend a half a day with a teacher throughout the year. It's usually the first bit is kind of, I'll know the superintendent's here. And after 15 minutes, they're going, I wish our bell schedule was different. The cafeteria food is this or that, or it's, hey, come see this. And then other teachers start coming to the door and then they talk to me too. So that is extremely important on the internal communication side to make sure, and they can ask me anything. I'm pulling threads out of this to take back to my team through all these visits to make sure we're doing what we say. And sometimes I sit in meetings that we go, this is important work, and it's not happening at the ground. And I'm going, well, it's not as important as we thought it was, because the people on the ground are saying it's getting in the way of the important work. So it's important for us to pulse our system. I try to get the assistant superintendents to do that as well. My assistant superintendent over student success randomly sits in IEP meetings to see if our customer service where it needs to be. Now, what you do with that once you bring it back is a big part. So, and we never can stop trying to get better at that. It's always going to be a work in progress for sure.
I love that.
I'll hit just a few other things we've done to try to get there. I talked about our annual report. That was something when I came in, I thought, trying to think of ourselves less as a school. We have a unique purpose that we do as an organization, but we are a large organization, and trying to think about, we are accountable. We don't raise our own dollars. And so we began working on an annual report, and we'll give it to County Commission tonight. We gave it to our board last month. I call it our yearbook. When you go through it, it's got all the stats and all of our annual plan, how we scored against the metrics, the ones we hit and the ones we didn't, and the ones we're continuing to work on. But it also tells stories throughout from
That's
what
awesome.
we're doing in every division. And so we're trying to let people understand and invite people into the school system. We've created a lot of groups. We have a CEO Champions group that has that's really driving our 865 accountability. We have one of those meetings later this week where they'll actually get to go into, we started holding those in a school where the principal then takes them to see the programs in action with kids, hear kids' stories. We were at Farragut a couple months ago and a student was talking about, I thought I wanted to be a personal trainer. Then I got to go as part of my guaranteed experience in 865 to D1, and I spent the day there and realized I don't want to do this. I want to be a nurse. I went home and told my mom, and she was thrilled. So it's important that we bring CEOs in to see the work. So all these opportunities are being opened up, which is making them ambassadors for our work, which goes back to why do we communicate? We communicate because I really believe if people aren't on board, it's because they don't understand. And if they don't understand, it's because we haven't communicated well. And so that's why we're working so hard through these different venues to be able to do it. And I guess why we're doing a podcast, right?
Yeah, and I think from the outside, sometimes it can be hard to see that intentionality with so much content being pushed out. When we come back, I think we can get into that a little bit and how the district and the media work together, even though sometimes it may seem like competing interests. If you've got a topic you'd like to see us cover, email us at theeducationblueprint@knoxschools.org. Welcome back to the Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk. Our guest today is Hallerin Hilton Hill, and we have definitely covered a lot today about the media and the district's philosophy on communication, but you guys work in oftentimes competing industries in the information game. What does that look like side by side?
Well, first thing I would say is we need you guys. We need the information. The people we serve, they need to know. There'll be controversial stuff. It rises, it falls. There are crises, there are challenges. I think the through line is, can we depend on you to tell us the truth and to give us the information we need so that parents can make the best decision for their kids? And the quality of the information and the availability of the information is all geared toward that from a purpose standpoint.
I agree. I spent my early career in journalism, and I think there's certainly this perception that there is a push and pull, a tension between the media and whoever they're trying to get the story from, in this case, the school system. I think in reality, though, the goals of both the media and KCS generally align. There's just, maybe different considerations and priorities along the way to get there. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think, Prentice, you're exactly right. I think, the media wants to tell the story, and they want to be accurate and get it out as fast as they can. We too need the media for that, to be able to spread the story, spread the message. I think the big factor in that is, our 60,000 folks that we deal with are all minors, and there are a lot of laws around that, and we always put kids first in everything we do. We're always going to put their safety first, and we have things like FERPA that protect what we can and can't say to the media. So we have to stand in that gap when a parent or a guardian or a family is not there.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about FERPA. What is that? What does it mean for kids?
So it's a federal law that allows us to release kind of to anybody, like what we call directory information. Directory information is a little more like what grade somebody's in, some kind of just generic knowledge, but nothing that would necessarily be identifiable back so that you could go, oh, that is, John Jones, that kid right there, right? So, we have that protection that we have to provide in the absence of the parent or guardian. So we have lots of checks on our side before those things come out. Sometimes law enforcement may be involved as well. And anything that they're involved in investigation, we're not able to comment on as well. And I know it probably leaves the general public kind of wanting more, and I know they just want to know, where's my student, how is my student? And the media wants to know the same thing because they're getting that same viewership that's asking those questions of them, that are the parents, that are the stakeholders in the community.
I think as a parent from the outside, sometimes it's hard to understand why information isn't being released, and obviously we always want to know more. Can you break down the KCS philosophy for me a little bit, just so we have a step-by-step of what goes through the mind of the principals and the district leadership when something happens that we want to get information out about?
Yeah, first of all, it may surprise some of our people that we actually have protocols. I think sometimes these aren't the things that we talk about a lot. We've talked about things like weather protocols. The same thing comes true when we talk about our communication philosophy. And again, not surprisingly, the top one's going to be safety first. So we're going to protect students and staff privacy. We make sure that the confidentiality is there. Our goal is not to be the cause of anybody being the front page story. That drives even everything. If we're out at a school doing a school visit and we're taking pictures, we have to ask which students have media clearances. So we make sure that their pictures don't show up. If a news reporter comes in, we need to turn the students backwards. We need to blur the shot down the hall. So safety first is always our first in communicating. And then we want to verify the facts. It's really important for us that we're accurate and that we're truthful in what we say. So we want to check and double check everything. Lots of times, media wants to know as soon as it's happening. It's a developing story and it develops very quick, especially with as we talked earlier, with some social media and things like that and folks texting. And so we want to make sure what we're saying is accurate. So verify the facts. We've always tried to, on the backside of those kinds of things, have like a press conference. We're not going to do that in the first 5 minutes. We're going to make sure everyone's safe, everything's secure, and we have all the facts. I think the local media understands that we're going to be available. And then finally, just be intentional. We want to be proactive and responsive. We also understand that even though we may not be able to tell everybody everything that's going on in that minute, we do kind of have an internal rule that we try to update every 30 minutes back to our families. And lots of times that's through our principal. We have an internal system called Parent Square that we do that on. Because again, we understand families want to know if my school's in lockdown, if we've heard there's the smell of gas in a building, like those kinds of things. And typically we'll have those sent from the principal if they're able to, again, depending on the situation, because they have a closer relationship with those families. So safety first, we want to verify the facts and want to be intentional in how we communicate.
You mentioned Parent Square, and I've gotten messages. I think a good example would be, even in the case of a fire drill, because if students are outside and somebody sees that and they put it on social media, like what's going on at such and such school. But I've gotten messages from the principal saying, just a heads up, we had a fire drill today. Everything was fine. So if you're wondering why your students were outside, that's basically what it was. And so I think using tools like that just to keep parents in the loop, regardless of the situation, is one of the better tools at the disposal of the district.
Yeah, I think that just speaks back to that intentionality. We are aware of the times we live in now, and almost all of our students have some kind of device. They've got the ability to communicate either through social media or text families, and that sometimes we even get news requests from those kinds of things, like a fire drill. So we try to be very intentional. There's that first communication that goes out, typically that could be proactive and say, here's what's going to go on today. If anything's prolonged during that time, like I said before, kind of every 30 minutes, and then we always want to wrap at the end, just because we know that it's important to close that loop.
If I had any advice on your side of the game, probably the most consequential book that I've read is the book Smart Brevity. So one of the stats in Smart Brevity is that when a person is reading an email or they're reading something they want to read, that they're expecting, 26 seconds before they start scanning. So if you don't know how to communicate in a concise way, realizing the clock is running, they get the essential information. To parents, I would recommend that you just take some time to familiarize yourself with all of the information tools that the school system has. Pick the one that best connects with how you live your life and tap into that on a regular basis. So if it's Facebook, if it's Instagram, whatever the platform is you prefer, that channel, lock into what the school system is saying on those channels and just review that on a regular basis, taking some ownership in seeking that information so that you're not surprised. Oh, this is test week. Oh, this is spring break. Oh, this is my parent-teacher meeting. To pay attention to all the multiple ways you're literally trying to put all the information and tools in front of us so that we can maximize our students' experience. Does that make sense?
I'll own that too, making sure we're making complex simple, making sure folks understand, and I love that 26-second rule.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great discussion today about the intention behind communication with our guest, Hallerin Hilton Hill.
And I just want to thank you for coming in. I want to thank you for the wisdom you bring, for your years of experience. I've always appreciated your heart, always appreciated your faith and who you are as a person. But I really think the service you really provide to our community is you are a trusted forum where folks can talk. And I think there's so many voices that come in across all spectrums, and you invite them in and have good conversation, which is extremely important.
Thank you, sir.
Still to come on the Education Blueprint.
That was a pivotal moment for me to realize that it's not about being the expert. It's about, can you communicate to 95% of the people, either on your staff or in the community, and do they understand it?
Welcome back to the Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk. I'm Prentice Elliott, the producer and co-host. Dr. Rysewyk, something that Hal mentioned early on, and I think that kind of resonated with me, was he talked about, in terms of messaging, one sentence clarity. Simplify and clarify. That's kind of been your MO. You talk a lot about making big small. And I guess I'm just curious about your philosophy of making that message, whatever it may be, accessible to everybody.
I think it really rings true what Howard said. Making complex simple is very, very difficult. I could remember being in a board meeting when I was an assistant superintendent and hearing a board member ask a question, and the person who stood up and answered that on staff was brilliant in their response, but the board member shut down and think, okay, your response I didn't really understand, but I'm going to feel stupid to ask a follow-up, right? And that was a pivotal moment for me to realize that it's not about being the expert. It's about, can you communicate to 95% of the people, either on your staff or in the community, and do they understand it? We want to make sure that happens. I heard it said before, kind of to explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner. Like, there is some of that. It's not belittling the audience. It's just understanding you've got to be able to step out and go, well, what does this mean to that customer, the parent, that customer, the student, that customer, the business person? What is it they want out of this? And we have to make sure we can explain it at that level if we really want to communicate and not just check a box that we got the message out.
Something Hal said that I think goes even beyond media and some of the other stuff we were talking about was, in the creative process, he was mentioning just making himself available, being open to things. I wonder how that plays into your work in being humble and open and available if there's a new idea, if something you're doing isn't working. How do you kind of approach those situations?
He dropped some really good nuggets in that being available, and he talked about being preparing in the shadows for when opportunity comes and you're ready. I think both of those matters. As long as we're in education, we have to continue to be willing to learn and willing to look at possibilities, try things out, and if they're not working, pull the plug and try the other thing. Because in the end, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about, are we advancing students? If we keep that at the core of our heart, then we're willing to ask any questions, own any mistakes, and move forward with what we need to do, what's best for kids.
You mentioned what's best for kids and students, and technology and social media is such a big part of their lives now. It's inescapable. When you and I were growing up, our communication with the outside world was a telephone that was attached to a wall. If we were lucky, it had a really long cord.
That's right.
So we could take it out of the kitchen where our parents couldn't hear us, and maybe a set of encyclopedias. That's not the case anymore. Kids have supercomputers in their pockets.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard on the radio that it's, your phone has more computing power than all the computers used to put man on the moon.
Mm.
And so with that comes a lot of great things and a lot of hope for the future, but also a lot of things we have to be very, very careful. So how does that work with public schools?
Yeah, cell phones are probably the thing now. AI is coming. It was probably chewing gum back in the day, right? So I'm saying there's always going to be these challenges. In education, we have to live right in that gray space, because our number one job is to prepare the next generation for the world they're going to live in, for the jobs they're going to have, right? My personal philosophy is keep kids safe. Allow a little bit of that kind of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back thinking. I know there have been some states who have taken some pretty hard stances on things like cell phones. And, I personally would say, I don't know, we're preparing you for the world after you graduate, because, you're 17, 18, walk across the stage, now you can have one. So I've not learned how to use it. I've not been exposed to the goods and the bads, all those kinds of things. Obviously, we're trying to get kids ready academically, but there are also these pieces of the world they're going to enter into. I think that's why the district making the decision to go 1-to-1. That was very innovative 10 years ago. This is the world. No one doesn't have a computer. You mentioned they have them in their pockets. So that's part of us getting them ready. Are there negative things that come? Sure. Are there, potential kids could cheat? Are there kind of a rise in, people saying nasty things about each other on a social media? Yes. But, when they turn 18, 19, those same things are going to exist. So while they're 12, while they're 10, if we can work with their parents, if we can work within showing them the right use. I kind of think about car wrecks. Well, we don't ban cars, right? We have to figure out, how do we teach them to be better drivers? How do we put them in situations where they know what to do on a rainy day, on a snowy day, at night? And I think that's what we need to do in education when it comes to technology. That does mean it opens the door for some of the things that we have to deal with. And sometimes it'll be a lot easier just to eliminate it all. But I don't think that's getting them ready for the world that we're preparing them for.
Something I think that's worth mentioning as a parent is kids have these devices that they bring home, but then you've also got the district who monitors these devices and has a lot of restrictions in place already on them. And there are apps for even their cell phones that are recommended by the district that we can download as parents that kind of help us keep track of what the kids are doing. And again, it doesn't take away all the responsibility of the parents at home and things that we have to do. But it's also not the district just saying, or schools just saying, here's all this technology, now go figure it out. You know, it's kind of this walking along with you as you try and teach your kids how to be in this world. And I think that's helpful going forward.
Yeah, I think the same thing. You know, in lots of ways we parallel. I'm a parent myself, you're a parent too. The school system parallels that a lot. We deal with kids who are developing. That's why we're a lot about second chances. You know, your childhood is when you make mistakes. We understand that, so we do have those safeguards so that no one goes too far, and we're able to look at some of the content and be able to capture that and have conversations, sometimes discipline if certain things are happening. But at the same time, all this is learning, because when students turn 18 and they're on their own, it's almost too late. So yeah, we have those safeguards in place as a district so that when they're 18, 19 years old, this is just a habit. This is just commonly how they deal with it. It's part of their world, part of their life, and they can be successful.
Something else we talked about with how was mainstream media and how it's changed. And there are so many places to get your news from now. And news is kind of in quotation marks because it almost depends on the source, you know, what the news is going to be, because it's really hard to say, even for adults, what's real and what's not. So for kids, learning how to navigate this new world of information and where to get your news sources as they grow up.
You're right. And a lot of that is getting back to teaching them in our ELA, our English Language Arts, and our social studies. There's a lot of talking about going back to primary sources, that kind of thing. Even though families sometimes may go, well, that's not what we believe. If they're getting exposed to something at school, that's part of the educational experience, right? It's saying, we're asking the student maybe their view on it, but also looking at all these other views of something so they can look at different sides of an issue, build those critical thinking skills. It doesn't always mean that whatever seems like maybe is a little more radical view that even the teacher believes that. They're just trying to expand that critical thinking for that student and help them understand that, because again, this is the world they're going to navigate, to your point. So they've got to be able to look through that, read through that, understand their trusted source, understand how to ask questions, understand how to dig deeper, and then critically think.
We owe a big thanks to Carnes High School, Fulton High, and Copper Ridge Elementary for allowing us to sample their morning announcements. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and follow and subscribe to the Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk for easy access to all our newest content. And if you can, leave us a review. It really helps others find the show. New episodes drop every other Wednesday. The Education Blueprint with Dr. Jon Rysewyk is a production of Knox County Schools and hosted by Dr. Jon Rysewyk with me, Prentice Elliott. Our team also includes Knox County Schools Assistant Superintendent of Strategy, Corey Lautner, KCS Creative Services Supervisor, Abby Harris, and KCS Executive Director of Public Affairs, Carly Harrington. Kaylee Walker coordinates promotion at Knox Schools on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Our cover art was designed by Justin Johnson.